Wiley, go find me gunpowder. Find me primers. Go fetch me some primers. Gunpowder. Fetch me some gunpowder. By God, I think he might be doing it. Okay, so welcome to part 2 of the making the Marlin shoot long range. I'm going to go into a little bit of brass, not much, and then we're going to talk about Ftx bullets, the ones with the ballistic point in them, or the plastic polymer tip. First, let's go in brass. Don't just dip into your range bucket and get brass that's been fired 800,000 times. You're probably not going to want to do that because you're going to be loading the higher pressures, and just use like a piece of brass that's been, use brass that's been fired probably 3 or 4 times, something along those lines. But if you're going to buy new brass, regardless of the manufacturer, I recommend Starline brass. It's real good stuff. It's thick walled, and it's really inexpensive. Somewhat. I mean, inexpensive. I'm not gonna say cheap. It's like 21 bucks for 100 through Midway plus shipping. So, highly recommend that stuff. Now, as far as for the brass, what I do is, because it's brand new, unfired, I still run it through my my resizing decapping die to make sure all that stuff is still good and it's the dimension that it's supposed to be. And then with the brand new brass, like I said, what you want to do is you want to load this stuff regardless of caliber. What I do is I will load it to a medium high velocity, not max, medium high, somewhere in there, because what I do is what I think needs to be done, I guess, is you need to stretch the brass out and get it worn in, get that fired one time, and then you go back through and you'll trim it and everything after that. And I just think you got to pre-stretch the brass a little bit. So that's what I have to talk about for brass. I'm not going to go into reloading in my process. There's a million videos out there, and it's kind of pointless. You can go, I don't do anything really different. The only things that I do different is I measure every single powder charge, and I do things on a single stage press. I like consistency. I will measure with my calipers every single round. I'll sort my brass to a consistent length, so I don't have to worry about that. And I'll clean out the primer pockets. Of them all. Just good brass quality control. So that's what I do. Now, moving on to the Ftx Bullet. I don't recommend using the Ftx bullets in a pistol caliber. There is a reason why that is. Let me explain. Let me explain a couple things about the Ftx Bullet. It's the one with the ballistic polymer tip on it, and let's see if we can see that. And it looks like this guy right here. All right, yeah, if you can see it now, you kind of know what I'm talking about. You see the point on there? You see how that bullet is shaped, right? This is what happens when you fire it and you get a recovered bullet. Can you see that? You see how that is? Look at the tip. See how deformed that is? See how it flattened out? The ballistic tip is still in there even. Almost every single one of these that I recovered look exactly like that. That is not what you want for deer hunting. Period. You don't want that. You want that sucker to mushroom out like a champ. And not do that. That's bad news. There is a couple other things. First, I'll explain to you what happens. This is the seating stem. This is for my 38-357, but the principle is still the same. See how that's shaped and it's got that concave shape to it? That works very well in the shape for the bullet. See how that fits in there? Alright. Again, this is really hard to do when you're all fingers. There. Maybe that'll make it a little bit better. Maybe that'll be a little bit better. Let me zoom in. No, I said zoom in. Now you see how that fits in there like that? That's the way it's supposed to be. Alright? This design is made to go around a hollow point or it's made for a certain shape of bullet and not pointy bullets. Here's another example of a lead bullet right here. See how that shapes to go around it like that? Alright. Now when you're dealing with the Ftx bullets, let me see if I can see one here. You can imagine what happens when you take this, which is not very deep. Alright. This is not very deep at all right here. What happens is it comes in contact with that ballistic tip. Alright. When it does, before it reaches, say, this point right here, before it reaches this point right here, where the bullet starts to come to a taper, the point hits the inside of this before the concave part reaches the outside of the bullet. So what happens is with your loading procedures, when you do it, it actually presses that tip in towards the bullet. It's not even noticeable. It's not even noticeable. But I have bought a box of the FTXs from Hornaday themselves. They did it, a box of ammo, and they didn't do that. Alright? They mushroomed out and everything fine. But with that little bit of push in like that, it pushes in enough to where when it hits something, it basically kind of implodes on itself instead of exploding on itself. The other reason is you got to trim your brass differently because the bullet is set in deeper. Alright, the cantilever is up here on a normal 240 grain. Well, this is 225, but on a 240 grain, it's back here in here somewhere. Alright? And you got to trim your brass unless you have Hornaday brass. Alright? The only way I see this working with the Lee product is if you'd have to drill a hole in the seating stem somewhere to accept that ballistic point. But regardless, the ballistic coefficients are less on this than they are on a regular 240 grain jacketed hollow point. The ballistic coefficient of the FTXs are 0.150. The Hornaday ones, the 240 grain jacketed hollow points, are 0.205. It's more aerodynamic in the hollow point than what this is. So for those reasons, I do not load the FTXs. It doesn't make any sense to me to do it. It's too much effort for not a lot of result. So I guess that'll conclude this video this time. I'm trying to make them short and sweet. So next video we will go ahead and we will I will do some shooting and we'll do some load testing and show you my process and the results and whatnot, go from there. So I just didn't want to bore you guys with a bunch of reloading videos. It's boring. So this is the most interesting part right here. So bear that in mind when you're buying bullets, alright? Do a little research, okay? So until next time, this is MI Shooter. You guys have a good one. Get out and shoot if you can, alright?